They laughed at me the moment I walked in. Not loudly, not cruelly enough to call it bullying, but loud enough for me to hear, sharp enough to sting. A soft chuckle from the corner, a muttered comment about another tourist, the kind of dismissal people save for someone they're certain doesn't belong. And in that moment, standing inside the echoing walls of the shooting range, I became the quiet woman everyone thought they could ignore. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I wasn't there for attention. Truth be told, I almost didn't walk in at all. My hands had hovered on the glass door for a full minute before I finally gathered the courage to step inside. The smell of gun oil and metal filled the air, a scent I hadn't breathed in for years. It pulled me back to a time long gone, days spent with my father in the back field, his steady voice guiding me as he placed the weight of his old rifle into my young arms. Those memories had carried me here today, but the men inside didn't see that. They saw a plain woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a simple coat. They didn't see my reasons, or the fire smoldering just beneath my quiet surface. They only saw an outsider, someone who didn't fit their image of a shooter. At the far end of the range stood the man everyone seemed to orbit around. The champion. Even without introductions, I knew who he was. His name echoed in whispers, followed by admiration and the kind of envy only winners attract. He stood taller than the rest, his broad shoulders wrapped in a sleek jacket, his voice carrying across the concrete walls like he owned the place. Every story he told ended with laughter. Every gesture drew nods of agreement. He was the star, the king of the range. And then there was me, an intruder in his kingdom. I tried to ignore their glances as I signed the waiver and collected my gear, but I could feel the weight of their eyes on my back. The champion noticed me right away. He looked me up and down, and his smirk spread so wide it made my stomach twist. "First time?" he asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. I wanted to lie, to shrug it off with some casual remark, but all I managed was a small nod. My voice refused to come out. His friends burst into laughter, the sound bouncing off the walls like ricochets. "Don't worry," one of them added. "We'll make sure you don't hurt yourself." My cheeks burned. I lowered my gaze, pretending not to hear. But the sting settled deep inside. I wasn't afraid of the weapon in my hands. I was afraid of their eyes, their laughter, their disbelief. I had walked in quietly, hoping to go unnoticed. Instead, I had become their joke. I took my place at the empty lane, the cold steel of the counter grounding me. My fingers brushed over the weapon, and memories surged back. My father's calloused hands steadying mine. The calm way he always said, "Patience, focus, trust yourself." He was gone now, years gone, but his words had never left me. They had carried me through grief, through loneliness, through the weight of being invisible in a world that never expected much from me. Maybe that was why I had come here. Maybe I was tired of being overlooked, tired of being laughed at. The champion's voice cut through my thoughts. "Don't be nervous," he called out mockingly. "It's not as easy as it looks." His friends laughed again, their chuckles, scraping against my skin like sandpaper. I breathed in slowly, my hand tightening around the grip. I wasn't nervous. I was angry. But anger had no place here. My father always told me that. Anger makes your hand shake, your aim falter, your judgment slip. Shooting was never about rage. It was about control. And if I wanted to silence their laughter, I would have to control myself first. I lifted the gun, the weight settling into my palms. The noise of the range faded until all I could hear was my own breathing. My heart slowed. My body steadied. I didn't care about the champion's smirk or the whispers or the laughter echoing behind me. I cared only about the target waiting at the other end, a white sheet with a black circle daring me to prove myself. And in that stillness, I made a promise. They would not laugh for long. What they didn't know what none of them could possibly imagine was that I wasn't here to play. I wasn't here for fun or curiosity or even sport. I had carried something inside me for years, a truth hidden beneath my quiet exterior. I knew how to shoot, not just well, not just good enough. I knew how to shoot better than most of the men in that room, and soon, very soon, they were about to find out. I stood there with the gun in my hands, and every nerve in my body felt alive. The champion and his friends had gone quiet for a moment, just long enough for me to sense their amusement simmering beneath the surface. They weren't impressed by my stance or my silence, or the calm way I held the weapon. They were simply waiting for me to embarrass myself. The sound of shots rang out from other lanes, echoing against the concrete walls, but all I could focus on was the low murmur of voices behind me. "She's shaking already," one of them whispered. "Bet she won't even hit the paper," another chuckled. I swallowed hard, pretending their words didn't reach me, but every syllable landed like a stone. I adjusted my grip, the cold steel pressing into my palms. My father's voice came back to me again, clear as if he stood right behind me. "Don't rush. The bullet only goes where the mind sends it. Control your mind, and the rest follows." I remembered the first time he had put a rifle in my hands. I had been 12, my arms too weak, my stance too unsteady. I missed the target completely that day, tears burning in my eyes from frustration. But he had just smiled, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and told me to try again. I learned then that precision didn't come from strength. It came from patience. That memory steadied me now. But the champion wasn't patient. He leaned against the divider of his lane, grinning as though he had already won a contest I hadn't agreed to join. "You know," he said loudly, "this is a lot harder than TV makes it look. A beginner like you should probably start with something softer. Maybe a BB gun." Laughter erupted again, bouncing around the walls. My cheeks burned, but I forced myself to focus on the target. His words didn't deserve my attention. Still, each one cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I closed my eyes for a brief second, breathing in. I could almost feel my father's hand resting lightly on my shoulder, steadying me. When I opened my eyes again, the target stared back at me, black and unyielding. The champion raised his weapon then, firing a quick set of shots. Each one landed, close to the center, tearing the paper neatly. His friends clapped, cheering, their voices echoing like a drumbeat of mockery. He bowed slightly as though he were performing on stage, soaking in the attention. Then he glanced at me. "Think you can beat that?" he asked. His tone wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was dismissive. He didn't believe I was worth competing against. I didn't answer. My silence seemed to amuse him even more. The truth was, part of me wanted to walk away. I could have put the gun down, left the building, and let their laughter follow me out the door. That would have been easier. Safer. It's what people expected. From me, the quiet woman who never pushed back. But then another memory surfaced, my father coughing into his handkerchief, his body frail, his eyes still burning with fire. He had asked me to promise him something that day. "Don't hide your strength," he had whispered. "The world will try to bury it, laugh at it, ignore it. But you know what you're capable of. Don't let them make you forget." I hadn't thought much about that promise until now. My finger brushed the trigger lightly and my heart steadied. I wasn't doing this for the champion or his friends or the crowd gathering slowly behind me. I was doing it for me. For the little girl who had once cried over missing the target. For the woman who had spent years shrinking into the background, biting her tongue while others spoke over her. And for the father whose lessons still lived in my blood. I raised the gun again. Behind me, I heard another whisper. "She won't even fire." I exhaled slowly, blocking out their voices. My eyes narrowed on the target. The room blurred at the edges until all I could see was the circle waiting for me to prove myself. But just as my finger began to tighten on the trigger, the champion spoke again, his voice sharp enough to break my focus. "Careful," he said. "Wouldn't want you to hurt yourself. Some people just aren't cut out for this." His friends laughed once more, and this time the sound sliced straight through me. I froze. My breath caught. My hand trembled for the briefest second, and doubt crept in like a shadow. What if they were right? What if I pulled the trigger and missed completely? What if all I managed to do was prove them right? The weight of their eyes pressed against my back. I lowered the gun slowly, setting it on the counter. The champion smirked, certain he had broken me. His friends clapped him on the shoulder already, turning their attention back to him, forgetting me entirely. But inside something shifted. I wasn't broken. I was gathering myself, because when I lifted that gun again, and I knew I would, it wouldn't be to defend myself against their laughter. It would be to honor the promise I had made long ago. And when I finally pulled the trigger, I swore the sound would silence every mocking word in that room. I picked up the gun again, the cold metal steadying my shaking hands. This time, I refused to let their voices penetrate the bubble I had created around myself. Every eye in the room was on me now. Even the others at the range seemed to pause, sensing the shift. The champion's smirk hadn't faded entirely, but there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, subtle and dangerous. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. I adjusted my stance, planting my feet firmly. My father's voice echoed in my mind, steady, unwavering. "Focus. Let everything else fade." And I tried. I blocked out the laughter, the whispers, the cocky confidence of the man at the other end of the room. I focused only on the target. The black circle waited for me, impassive, demanding precision. Then, just as I was about to squeeze the trigger, something unexpected happened. A sudden clatter came from behind. A woman, one of the champion's friends, had dropped a magazine onto the floor. Everyone's eyes flicked to the noise. The champion turned sharply, irritation flashing across his face. "Careful," he snapped. "This isn't a game." I froze, my finger hovering over the trigger. My mind raced. Every muscle in my body tensed. The distraction could have ruined everything. And for a moment, I wondered if I should just step back, leave, and let them have their victory. But then I felt it. The surge of determination I had been building for weeks, for months, for years. The memory of my father, of the afternoons in the backfield, of his quiet insistence that I could do this. I inhaled slowly, centering myself. "No," I whispered to myself. "Not today." I raised the gun again. The target seemed farther than it had before. The circle impossibly small. The champion shifted his weight. Leaning against the divider, studying me with a mixture of amusement and growing unease. I felt his eyes like fire on my back, burning, trying to intimidate me. But it didn't work. Not anymore. I aimed, exhaling, slowly, and pulled the trigger. The sound cracked through the room. Sharp. Final. The room froze. Everyone stopped moving, as if the air itself had paused. I looked at the target, expecting the worst. An empty white sheet. A hole somewhere off-center. Proof that I didn't belong here. But then I saw it. Dead center. Perfect. The kind of shot that made your stomach lurch with disbelief. The black circle had been pierced cleanly, the paper barely trembling. A stunned silence followed. The champion blinked, once, twice. His jaw tightened. The smirk that had once been so confident was gone, replaced by something I had never seen on him before. Shock. His friends exchanged glances, unease rippling through them. "Did she?" one of them muttered. I lowered the gun slowly, trying to stay calm. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. I had done it. I had proven something, not just to them, but to myself. And then, just as I was beginning to think the moment was mine, the champion stepped forward. His pride had been wounded, and he wasn't about to let it go. "You got lucky," he said sharply. "One shot doesn't mean anything." His tone carried authority, but there was an edge of desperation beneath it. I realized then that I had actually gotten under his skin. That recognition made a small, fierce smile curl at the corners of my lips. "I don't think it was luck," I said softly, just loud enough for him to hear. The room seemed to hold its breath. My words weren't meant to mock, but to assert. To declare that I was here, that I could do this, and that I wasn't invisible. The champion's eyes narrowed. His friends shifted uneasily behind him. One of them whispered something under his breath, probably a warning or an excuse, but I didn't care. I had their attention. I had shifted the balance in the room with a single shot. Then came another unexpected twist. One of the younger shooters at the lane next to mine, someone I hadn't even noticed before, whispered, "You should try another round. See if it's a fluke." A few heads turned to me. The challenge in his tone was unmistakable. They were daring me, testing me, trying to see if I could be reduced to a one-shot wonder. And for a moment I felt the familiar fear creeping in, the fear of failing, of giving them reason to laugh again, but I couldn't, not now. I took a deep breath, my hands steady. I wouldn't be silenced, I wouldn't be laughed at, and I wouldn't let doubt control me. The champion may have ruled the room with confidence, but I had something stronger, years of practice, years of restraint, and a resolve that refused to break. As I loaded the next round, I realized this was only the beginning. The laughter had stopped, but the real test was about to begin. They thought they were in control, that they had the upper hand. But they had underestimated me. They had no idea what I was capable of, and neither did I, not fully, not until I fired again. I took a deep breath and reloaded, my hands surprisingly steady. The first shot had already shaken the room, but I could feel the electricity in the air shifting now. Eyes were glued to me, not in amusement, but in disbelief. Whispers spread like wildfire, soft at first, then growing into murmurs that no one tried to hide. The champion's expression had changed entirely. His smirk was gone. Instead, there was tension, sharp and unyielding in his jaw. His confident stance had shifted to one of calculation, as if he were trying to figure out what I had that he didn't. Pride, I realized, was clinging to him like armor. But even armor can crack. He started, then paused. His voice faltered, which only fueled the murmurs around him. I ignored him. I didn't need his approval, and I wasn't going to feed his ego by responding. I focused entirely on the target. The black circle was impossibly small, yet I could see it clearly, almost as if it were daring me. My pulse steadied. My father's words echoed in my mind. "Trust yourself." And I did. I aimed carefully, adjusting my stance just slightly, and squeezed the trigger. The second shot rang out. There was a pause, a heartbeat that stretched, and then a sharp collective intake of breath from everyone in the room. The shot had hit exactly where the first one had. The two holes in the paper were practically overlapping, perfectly aligned. Dead center. The silence was deafening. The champion's face went pale. His friends froze mid-laugh, mid-movement, their confidence shattered in an instant. I felt something I had never expected: power. Not arrogance, not cruelty, just a quiet, unshakable power. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not mocked, not whispered about, but truly acknowledged. He stepped forward, his stance rigid. That's not possible," he said. His voice was low, almost disbelieving, but there was an edge. Now, sharp and dangerous. I didn't answer. I simply reloaded for the third shot, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me like a storm. Then it happened. Something I didn't anticipate. The champion lunged forward suddenly, Not in anger, but in a move meant to intimidate me. He leaned close to my lane, his eyes narrowing. "Step aside," he barked, his voice louder this time. "You've had your luck. Let the real shooter take over." His hand hovered near his weapon, a silent threat. My chest tightened. The room went utterly silent. Even the younger shooters who had been murmuring a moment ago seemed frozen. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to step back, to retreat, to avoid confrontation. But something inside me snapped. I realized then that this wasn't just about the target, or the record, or even the laughter I had endured. This was about standing up not only to him, but to every moment I had ever been dismissed, ignored, or told I wasn't enough. "No," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. "I'm not stepping aside." The room held, its breath. The champion's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and fury crossing his features. I could almost hear the disbelief. This quiet, ordinary-looking woman defying him, not with words, but with resolve. He took a step closer. "Do you even know what you're doing?" he demanded. "This isn't a toy." "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said. My voice gained strength, fierceness that surprised even me. "And I'm done proving it to anyone but myself." The tension was palpable. I could see the sweat forming at his temple, the subtle shift in his stance as he realized that he had miscalculated me entirely. The whispers around the room had grown louder, some impressed, some anxious, but none of them dared move. I raised my gun, focusing entirely on the target. The champion stepped back slightly, probably realizing that intimidation would no longer work. My hands were steady, my breathing was controlled, every muscle in my body was perfectly aligned, every thought singular. Focus. Then I fired the third shot. The bullet tore through the air, and the sound was louder this time, almost violent in its finality. My heart pounded as I lowered the weapon. The target told the story. The third shot landed perfectly in the same spot as the first two, merging into one small, precise hole that seemed almost impossible to achieve. Gasps erupted across the range. The champion's jaw dropped, his eyes locked on the target as though he might not believe it. He swallowed hard, his pride clearly struggling to survive. His friends stared, mouths slightly open, no longer laughing, no longer daring to speak. And me? I felt a rush unlike anything I had ever known. Not just triumph, but release. Every ounce of doubt, every moment I had been laughed at. Every time. I had been told I wasn't enough. All of it seemed to melt away in that moment. But even as I lowered the gun and tried to steady my shaking hands, I knew one thing clearly. The conflict wasn't over. This wasn't just about bullets and targets anymore. It was personal now. The champion wouldn't accept this quietly. The room had changed, and so had the rules, and somehow, deep down, I realized I was ready for whatever came next. The silence in the room was almost unbearable. Every eye followed me. Every heartbeat felt like it echoed off the concrete walls. The champion stood frozen, his pride shattered, but I could see the fire rekindling behind his eyes. He wasn't done. No one who had ever been at the top, who had ever tasted victory, could accept being eclipsed so easily. He started, his voice low, controlled, but laced with venom. "You think that means anything?" I didn't flinch. I didn't answer. I simply reloaded, my fingers moving with a calm precision that surprised even me. The adrenaline was still, there humming beneath my skin, but it wasn't fear this time. It was anticipation. I had already taken the first step, the first shot. Now it was his turn to respond, and I could feel the tension coiling in the room like a spring ready to snap. He took a deep breath, stepping back to his lane, and loaded his gun with deliberate, almost exaggerated movements. I could see the strain in his jaw, the tightness in his shoulders. This was more than competition for him now. This was a matter of pride, of ego, of proving that no one, not even some quiet, overlooked woman, could outshine him. His first shot rang out. It hit the target near the center, almost perfect, but not quite. My pulse quickened as I watched the paper tremble from the impact. His second shot was closer. A small cheer rose from his friends, but I could see the frustration simmering beneath the surface. Every movement, every subtle glance toward me betrayed the fear he was trying to hide. The room seemed to shrink around us. Other shooters stopped, the air thick with tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The whispers I had ignored earlier had turned into gasps of awe and disbelief. They were watching a battle unfold that no one had expected, a challenge that had gone beyond the realm of ordinary competition. "You think you can do it again?" The champion sneered at me, though his words were weaker than his usual bravado. "One perfect shot doesn't make you special." I swallowed, keeping my expression neutral. I wasn't here to argue. I wasn't here to prove him wrong with words. My gun was my statement, my focus, my discipline, my patience. It would speak louder than anything he could say. I raised the weapon again, aiming for the target with deliberate care. Every fiber of my body was taut with concentration. I could feel the weight of every eye in the room, the quiet anticipation, the tension pressing against me from every direction. The champion's gaze was like fire, trying to intimidate, trying to make me falter. But I didn't falter. Not this time. I squeezed the trigger. The bullet tore through the air faster than I could even register and hit the target. Dead center. Again. Perfect. The room erupted, not with laughter, not with cheers, but with stunned silence followed by a low hum of disbelief. The champion's jaw dropped. His eyes widened in shock, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. His friends stepped back, their expressions a mixture of awe and fear. "That's impossible," he said, barely, above a whisper. His hands tightened around his gun. "No one hits the center 3 times in a row." I lowered the weapon slowly, my heart hammering, my hands steady despite the adrenaline. I had done it. Twice before, I had held their attention. But this was something else. I had changed the game. I had made them question everything they thought they knew about me, about skill, about luck. The champion stepped toward me, his face pale, but his expression sharp with determination. "Show me again," he demanded. "Prove that it wasn't a fluke." I met his gaze without hesitation. My father's words came to me once more. Strength isn't loud. It's quiet, and it's steady. Let them see you. I nodded slightly, silently accepting the challenge. Then came a shift I hadn't expected. One of his friends, the one who had laughed the loudest at my entrance, stepped forward, almost nervously. Maybe we should call it a tie," he suggested, glancing at the champion. The champion ignored him, his focus entirely on me. I could feel the tension radiating from him like a physical force. The air between us was charged, almost dangerous, as if the next action could tip the balance entirely. I reloaded for the next shot. The weight of the gun was comforting now. The smell of gunpowder, the echo of the range, even the heat of the champion's gaze. It all sharpened my senses. This was no longer just about a single victory. This was about proving something deeper, that I couldn't be dismissed, that my quiet exterior hid a strength no one had expected. I raised the gun again, aiming, holding my breath, and the sound of the next shot sliced through the air. The target trembled, then remained still. When I lowered the weapon, the result made everyone in the room inhale sharply. Another perfect hit, merging seamlessly with the last 3. Dead center. Unbroken. Unstoppable. The champion staggered slightly backward as though physically struck. His face was pale, his composure shattered. I could see the disbelief in his eyes, the first real fear I had ever witnessed from him, and I knew, in that moment, that everything had changed. The room, the challenge, even the champion himself. It would never be the same again. But I also knew, deep in my heart, that the true test was only just beginning. The room was thick with tension, the kind that presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Every eye was on me, and I could feel the weight of their disbelief as though it were a physical force. The champion's jaw was tight, his hands clenched around his gun. I had never seen someone so accustomed to control, completely unmoored, and I knew in that moment that he wouldn't let this end quietly. "You think you've proven something?" he said, his voice low but deadly calm. "You think a few lucky shots make you better than me?" I met his gaze steadily. "I'm not lucky," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "I know exactly what I'm doing." He laughed, a short, sharp bark, but it lacked the confidence it once held. "You think you can beat me? All your quiet practice, all your whispers to yourself, it doesn't matter here. This is my arena." His words might have shaken someone else, but not me. I had spent years being overlooked, being underestimated, being told I didn't belong. I had learned how to survive that. And now it was no longer just about the target. It was about proving that strength doesn't always announce itself. It sometimes moves quietly, unseen until it strikes. "Then let's see," I said simply. Murmur ran through the room. The other shooters moved back slightly, giving space, sensing that what was about to happen was no ordinary challenge. The champion's friends whispered among themselves, their disbelief growing, their bravado faltering. The tension was a living thing, thickening with each heartbeat. The champion stepped forward, raising his gun again. "I'll make this simple," he said, his eyes locked on mine. 3 shots. Best of 3. You fail, you leave, you win, and maybe you've earned a moment of respect. I nodded, already feeling the adrenaline sharpen every sense. Could see the target at the far end. Black circle, calm and unyielding. I felt the weight of the room, the eyes, the disbelief, all trying to unbalance me. But I centered myself. Every memory of my father's lessons, every quiet afternoon at the back field, every whispered encouragement came back with vivid clarity. "Ready?" he asked, though his voice lacked its former confidence. I raised my weapon, feeling its weight steady in my hands. My grip was firm, my breath even. My heart pounded, yes, but it was the rhythm of focus, not fear. "Go," I said. He fired first. The shot rang out like a clap of thunder. It hit the target, close to the center, but not perfect. I could see the tension in his shoulders as he took his second shot, adjusting, aiming harder, sharper. Another near-perfect hit. I noticed the flicker of panic in his eyes when he glanced at me. It was my turn. I inhaled slowly, blocking out every sound except the soft hum of my own heartbeat. I raised the gun, feeling the familiar weight and coldness in my palms. Every thought narrowed down to a single line. Target. Aim. Focus. Pull. I squeezed the trigger. The bullet tore through the air faster than I could even register and hit the target. Dead center. Perfect. The hole lined up almost seamlessly with my previous shot. Gasps erupted across the room. Even the champion faltered, blinking, his confidence cracking further. I didn't move. I kept my stance, calm, unshaken. He fired again, desperate now. The shot was good, but it wasn't perfect. His next one shook him visibly. He adjusted, aiming with more force, more intensity. But it was too late. The room had shifted. He was no longer the undisputed master of this space. I could see the frustration building, raw and dangerous. I raised my weapon again, every movement deliberate, every breath controlled. The final shot was mine. The silence was almost unbearable, the anticipation pressing down on me. Every eye watched, waiting, sensing the magnitude of what was about to happen. I fired. The bullet tore through the air and hit the target perfectly, merging with my previous shots. Clean, precise, unstoppable. The room froze. Every whisper died. The champion's face went pale, disbelief etched into every line. His hands trembled slightly, the first sign of fear I had ever seen in him. The weight of the moment hit me fully then. I had not only proven myself, but also shattered the illusion of control he had held over the room for years. His dominance, his arrogance, the laughter at my entrance, it was all gone. Every eye acknowledged it, and yet I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I simply lowered the gun, feeling a calm certainty I had never felt before. I had reached the peak of this challenge. I had faced the judgment, the doubt, the sneers, and I had come out unbroken. But I knew the story wasn't finished. I could see it in the champion's eyes. His pride, though wounded, was still alive. This confrontation, this battle of skill and resolve, had not yet ended. I realized then that the true climax was not just about hitting the target. It was about what would happen next, how he would respond, and how I would stand my ground when the final reckoning came. Every muscle in my body was ready, every sense alert. The silence in the room was no longer oppressive. It was anticipatory. Everything had led to this moment, and whatever came next, I was prepared to face it head on. The silence in the range stretched for what felt like an eternity. The echoes of my shots had barely faded, but their impact was everywhere, palpable in the way the champion's hands trembled slightly, in the sharp intake of breath from the onlookers, in the shifting weight of those who had once mocked me. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. The champion finally moved, and it was slow, deliberate, like a predator realizing it had been outmaneuvered. His face was pale, his usual arrogance stripped away, replaced with a flicker of something I hadn't expected: vulnerability. He stepped toward me, the distance between us charged with unspoken tension. "You." "How?" he demanded, his voice breaking slightly. There was a sharp edge of disbelief, but beneath it, I sensed rage simmering. That was impossible! No one hits the center 3 times in a row! No one!" I didn't respond. I let him talk. Let him unravel. Part of me wanted to savor this moment, the first time in years that I had power in a room, and it wasn't fleeting. I had claimed it with skill, with focus, with quiet determination that no one had seen coming. His hands tightened on the weapon. "Show me again," he growled, almost pleading. "Do it again. Prove it wasn't luck." I raised my gun slowly, my pulse steady. The tension in the room was like a living thing, pressing against me, daring me to falter. I could feel the champion's gaze like fire on my back, trying to break me, trying to shake my concentration. But I had learned long ago that strength isn't about confrontation. Strength is about control. I inhaled deeply, letting the weight of the moment anchor me. I squeezed the trigger. The bullet tore through the air, and when it hit the target, the room seemed to shatter. Dead center, perfect again, merging seamlessly with my previous shots. The sound echoed in the concrete walls like the final verdict. For a moment, no one moved. Then I felt it. The collective intake of breath, the murmurs that were half shock, half awe. The champion staggered backward, his face pale, his jaw tight. I could see the disbelief etched deep into his features. His friends froze as well, unable to process what had just happened. "You," he breathed, words failing him entirely. Then he laughed, but it was hollow, almost bitter. You're not human." The weight of his words struck me in a different way, not as a compliment, but as a recognition that I had crossed a line, shattered expectations, and rewritten the rules of the room. For years he had been the unchallenged master, untouchable, unshakable, and in one series of shots I had undone all of that. I lowered my gun, letting the moment settle. My hands were steady, my breathing even. But inside, my heart was pounding. Not from fear, but from the intensity of the victory, from the adrenaline that had carried me through years of quiet dismissal. Then the champion's composure cracked, fully. He slammed his weapon onto the counter, the metallic clang echoing through the room. "This isn't over," he spat, his voice trembling. "I've never lost to anyone, and I won't lose to you." Something in me shifted at that moment. I realized that my battle wasn't just with him. It was with the years of being underestimated, of being laughed at, of being told I didn't belong. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pure, unfiltered, vindication. "I've already won," I said quietly, my voice calm but resolute. "You can't take that away from me." The champion's hands trembled as he collected his composure. He looked at me for the first time, not as an opponent to dismiss, but as someone who had changed the rules of the game. I could see it in the way his shoulders slumped slightly, the tension in his posture, the way his friends glanced at him nervously. He was forced to reckon with the reality that I had just done what no one thought possible. The range remained, still for a moment longer, then slowly, whispers began. People who had mocked me now stared in awe. Some approached cautiously, offering nods of respect, hesitant smiles, a quiet acknowledgement of the skill and focus I had shown. It was surreal. I had expected confrontation, maybe grudging respect, but this was something else entirely. And yet, despite the victory, I felt the weight of what had just happened. The champion's eyes never left mine, and I knew he wasn't done processing it. The tension lingered, like the calm before a storm. This wasn't a final victory. It was a beginning. The moment when everything had changed, when I had proven to the world and to myself that I could no longer be ignored. I felt a rush of emotion I hadn't expected. Pride, relief, and something deeper. Something almost fragile, like hope. I had faced their judgment, their laughter, and the champion himself, and I had survived. Not just survived, but emerged stronger, unstoppable. But even as I let myself breathe, I knew the aftermath was just beginning. The whispers, the stares, the acknowledgement, they were only the start of the ripple I had set in motion. And as I looked at the champion, still reeling, I realized that some battles weren't won with a single shot. Some battles, the most important ones, were won in the quiet moments, in the resolve you carried within you, in the courage to stand and never back down. And in that moment, I knew I had done exactly that. The room was quiet, but it felt different now. Not tense, not charged with disbelief, but still alive with a kind of awe I hadn't expected. People weren't laughing anymore. They weren't whispering doubts or mocking anyone. They were watching a moment that had shifted something far bigger than the target at the end of the lane. The champion was the first to speak, his voice low, cautious. I didn't expect that," he admitted, almost reluctantly. His friends had backed away, their expressions a mixture of respect and shock. Even the young shooters, who had been the loudest critics earlier, were silent, their eyes wide. I lowered my gun fully, resting it on the counter. My hands were steady, but my heart was still racing, not from adrenaline, but from the enormity of what had just happened. I had faced judgment, ridicule, and doubt, and I had proven myself, not just to the champion or his friends, but to the world, and most importantly, to myself. The champion stepped toward me slowly, each movement deliberate. He didn't reach for his weapon this time. Instead, he extended a hand, a gesture that felt foreign and yet strangely fitting. "I owe you respect," he said quietly. "You're better than I thought. Not just in skill, but in courage." I studied his hand for a moment, considering the weight of his words. I had expected anger, continued denial, maybe even confrontation. But this acknowledgement, was more powerful than any victory I could have claimed on paper. I took his hand and shook it firmly. "Thank you," I said simply. It wasn't about proving him wrong anymore. It was about closure. The room relaxed, almost imperceptibly. Whispers turned into murmurs of admiration. Some shooters approached me, offering congratulations, nods of acknowledgement. A few even asked for advice, shyly, hesitant, as though recognizing that this quiet woman they had underestimated had something to teach them. I looked back at the target. 3 perfect holes, each one overlapping the last. The paper seemed to hold the story of my journey, a quiet determination, years of practice, patience, and focus. I realized then that the real victory hadn't been in besting the champion, or in proving anyone wrong. It had been in trusting myself, in believing that I could achieve something extraordinary despite the doubts and the whispers of the world. The champion's gaze met mine again. This time, there was no smirk, no prideful edge, just respect, tempered by the realization that his perception of me, and perhaps of what was possible, had changed forever. "You've set a new standard," he said quietly, almost in awe. I have a lot to learn from that." And in that moment, I understood something important. The greatest challenges in life weren't always about competition. Sometimes they were about proving to yourself that you could rise above expectation, fear, and doubt. Sometimes the real triumph was internal, not external. I stepped away from the counter and lowered my gun completely. The weight of it, the significance of it, had passed into something quiet and strong inside me. I could feel the energy of the room shifting, the tension dissolving into something lighter, something like respect, recognition, and the acknowledgement of potential that had long been overlooked. I walked past the lanes slowly, taking in the faces of those who had laughed at me before. Some avoided my eyes, unsure what to say. Others offered small, respectful nods. I realized that my journey had changed not just my perception of myself, but theirs as well. Their world had shifted in the smallest but most profound ways, and I could feel it. As I left the range that day, I thought about my father. I could almost hear his voice, soft and steady, proud. "You trusted yourself. You believed. That's all that matters." The truth was, I had never been seeking recognition from anyone but myself. Every ounce of preparation, every quiet moment of focus, every lesson learned from him had brought me here. Not to the target, not to the champion, but to the understanding of my own strength. I stepped outside into the late afternoon sunlight, the world feeling larger, more open, and strangely warmer. The echoes of the range faded behind me, but the lesson remained. Quiet determination can move mountains. Confidence doesn't always roar. It sometimes whispers, persistent and unyielding. And when the world doubts you, sometimes all it takes is one unwavering step forward to change everything. I glanced back at the building one last time, the memory of the challenge lingering in my mind. I smiled, not from triumph alone, but from the knowledge that I had proven something far more important than skill. I had proven that strength, focus, and belief in oneself could outshine any doubt, any ridicule, any expectation. And as I walked away, the sun warming my face, I carried with me a quiet certainty. I would never again let anyone define what I was capable of. Not the champion, not the whispers, not even the echoes of doubt I had carried for so long. I knew now exactly who I was, and nothing could take that away.